Remembering the events from an hour ago, Jenny felt her heart being torn apart. She wished it was just a nightmare, but unfortunately, it was the harsh reality she had to face. Her lover had left her, and worse, he had been cheating on her with her own sister. The affair had been going on for 3 years without her knowing. Thinking about how she had been deceived, Jenny couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh at herself. Raka's gaze, her lover, as he walked down the aisle holding her father's hand, was still fresh in her memory. It wasn't love that reflected in his eyes. When her father handed her over to Raka, the man coldly rejected her and said, "Did you really think I would marry you?" Jenny couldn't believe what she had just heard. Gently, she tried to reach for Raka's hand. "Raka, what do you mean?" But before she could finish, Raka pushed her, sending her crashing to the floor. "Don't touch me, you disgust me," he spat, hatred glaring in his eyes. Still in shock, Jenny watched as Raka walked toward her sister, Dania, and tenderly offered her his hand. "Sweetheart, are you happy now?" Raka smiled warmly at Dania, while Jenny felt her legs give way beneath her. Tears flowed uncontrollably down her cheeks. As Jenny tried to get up, Dania approached and offered her hand. "Come on, get up, sis." But after Jenny accepted the help, she watched in disbelief as Dania coldly wiped her hand with a tissue. Jenny stared at her sister in shock, and before she could ask why, Dania interrupted coldly, "From the start, sis." Jenny tried to grasp the meaning behind her sister's words, but before she could process it, Raka added with a sneer, "Did you really think I was interested in you? I was just playing with you, Jenny. You're nothing but trash compared to my Dania." Rage boiled inside Jenny. Trembling, she grabbed Raka's collar and shouted, "Why, Raka? Why did you do this to me?" But before she could continue, Dania shoved her away harshly. "Don't touch my husband," she screamed in fury. The hall filled with gasps and murmurs of disbelief. Romy, Jenny's father, stood frozen, unable to believe what he was witnessing. But in an instant, Romy regained his composure and began to walk toward Dania. Suddenly, a loud slap echoed through the hall. The second slap followed quickly, sending Dania stumbling. As Romy raised his hand to slap her again, someone grabbed his arm and shoved him to the ground. "How dare you slap my wife?" Raka said angrily. Those words hit Jenny like a storm. "My wife? Dania is Raka's wife? Impossible." Jenny couldn't believe her ears. While she was still in shock, she saw her father fall into a glass table, blood trickling from his forehead. "Dad!" Jenny screamed as she ran to help him. Romy's eyes were filled with shame and regret. "Forgive me, Jenny. This is all my fault." Jenny was stunned by her father's apology. Tears flowed uncontrollably. "No, Dad. This isn't your fault," she said, trying to comfort him, even though her own heart was shattered into pieces. Dania, standing not far away, smiled coldly. "How pathetic. You two crying together? Let me join in," she said, walking toward Jenny and Romy with hatred in her steps. Anger surged inside Jenny. With the last of her strength, she stood up and glared directly at Dania. "Don't you dare come near us," she said firmly. The entire room fell silent, and even Dania took a few unconscious steps back. Jenny's gaze burned into her sister. "Why, Dania? Why did you do this? I've always loved you, always cared for you. What made you destroy my life like this?" Dania only sneered. "You've always taken everything from me. Did you think I could just stand by? You had everything, while I got nothing." Jenny was crushed by her sister's confession. Dania continued, her hatred rising with each word. "After Mom died, Dad loved you more because you reminded him of her. I never got the chance to study abroad like you, because Dad only cared about you. You took everything from me." Romy stood up, trying to explain. "No, Dania. I love both of you. I was just worried about you because of your fragile health. Don't blame your sister." But Dania wouldn't hear it. "That's a lie. You only cared about her. That's why I planned all of this with my husband. I wanted Jenny to feel the pain I've endured all these years." Jenny could only stand in silence, her heart torn apart by her sister's words full of bitterness. The word, husband, echoed in Jenny's ears. Everything she had just heard felt surreal, like a never-ending nightmare. "You must be wondering how Raka became my husband, how we got married. Strange, isn't it?" Dania spoke with a triumphant smile. Jenny, still dazed, could only shake her head. When did you two get married?" she asked in a trembling voice. 3 years ago, Dania answered with a small laugh. "We've been married for 3 years, right when you started dating Raka. You had no idea what was really going on, did you?" In an instant, Jenny's world crumbled. Raka had been married to her sister for 3 years, yet all that time she thought they were the perfect couple. Every beautiful memory with Raka suddenly felt like a bitter illusion. Her body went weak, and tears began to flow uncontrollably. "Why, Dania, how could you do this? I'm your sister. I've always loved you." Dania smirked. "Hurts, doesn't it? Losing someone you love? That's exactly what I wanted you to feel, Jenny. You've always had everything: Dad's love, Mom's attention. I've always lived in your shadow. Now it's your turn to feel what I've felt my entire life." On the other side of the room, Romy, their father, finally snapped out of his shock and suddenly yelled, "Ungrateful child. How dare you treat your sister like this? You are no longer my daughter. I revoke all your rights as a member of the Perwinda family, starting today." Before Romy could continue, Raka's cold voice interrupted, "Do that, and I'll make sure all business collaborations between the Perwinda family and Dweetama end today." Romy glared at Raka, seething with rage. "Do you really think I care about business right now? After what you've done to my daughter, I will never work with you again." Just as Romy was about to act further, Jenny weakly stood beside her father. "Dad, that's enough. Let it go. This is all my fault. Don't sacrifice our company over this," she said softly, yet firmly. Jenny walked out of the ballroom, leaving Dania and Raka laughing behind her. Her tears fell uncontrollably as she exited the wedding hall that was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but instead had become the worst nightmare she could ever imagine. Elsewhere, in a luxurious building in Surabaya, a young man sat in his office with a cold expression. Julian, a young and successful CEO of the major company Bogatama, was one of the most influential figures in the city. His sea-green eyes radiated authority, but today there was something different. There was a deep disappointment within him, as if something major was troubling his mind. While he was deep in thought, a knock came at his office door. Irritated, Julian threw his pen toward the door. "I told you not to disturb me," he snapped. Raphael, his loyal assistant, quickly backed away from the door and replied in a trembling voice, "I'm sorry, Mr. Julian. But this is important, it's about Miss Jenny." Hearing Jenny's name, Julian's expression changed. "What happened?" he asked urgently. "Miss Jenny's wedding has been called off. It turns out Raka and Dania have been married for a long time and have been playing Miss Jenny all along," Raphael explained, holding his breath. Julian's face hardened. His heart was torn between anger and relief. Anger because Jenny had been hurt so deeply, but also relief, knowing that now there was an opportunity for him to be close to her. "Get the car ready. I'm going to find her," he ordered decisively. As Julian left the office, Raphael let out a sigh of relief. He knew how important Jenny was to his boss, even though Julian rarely expressed his emotions. Over the past few weeks, the entire company had felt immense pressure due to Julian's frustration surrounding Jenny's wedding. Now, Raphael could only hope things would change for the better after the wedding was cancelled. Thank you all. Have a nice day. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, so that the admin is more enthusiastic to provide entertainment for all of you. See you in the next video.